For so many entrepreneurs and professionals, the dream is clear, a 7-figure lifestyle. But in reality, burnout, long hours, missed family moments, and a creeping sense that success is costing too much.
Well, what you're describing is people who are trying and efforting and working, and what results from that is not only their own burnout, but the burnout of others around them.
My guest today has spent decades helping leaders to rewrite their story. Dr. Ron Stotts is a 3-time best-selling author with a PhD in psychology and chiropractic. He's explored the wisdom of ancient traditions and the cutting edge of neuroscience. And through it all, he has discovered what it really takes to develop into a conscious leader. Someone who can scale impact, influence, and income without sacrificing time, family, or freedom.
It's really amazing if people begin to understand that when there's struggle in their life, that is really nothing more than an indicator that they're ready to evolve. When you're running into challenges in your life, in your work, in your organization, that's not a problem, that's an opportunity.
So I want to ask him the questions that matter most. How do we lead in a way that doesn't cost us our soul? How do we scale our life without losing the things that make it worth living? And what does it take to step into that kind of leadership that creates not just generational wealth, but legacy? Dr. Ron, you are welcome to the Growth Code podcast. So let's start at the beginning. So behind the best-selling books, the fancy titles, the international stages, who exactly is Dr. Ron Stotts, and what exactly set you on the turning point to this path that you're currently on?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I was kind of raised to be the all-American kid, growing up in the outdoors and athletics and that type of thing. And it wasn't until I joined the Marine Corps at 20 that I realized that I was going in the wrong direction way too quickly. And, you know, it was just, you know, the Vietnam War was something I was completely against. And so I did get out of the military on a health issue. But, you know, it was in those early 20s that I recognized that I'd been programmed to literally be the foreman for the gas company rather than to know who I truly was and what I really wanted to be. And so from that, it was a very deep, dark time in my life. And I just began that inner journey to discover who I was. What were all those limiting thoughts that were running my life that I hadn't even been aware of before. And it was in that journey that I started getting fascinated with what the capabilities of humans and humans are, who we can truly be, what we're really truly capable of.
Thank you, Dr. Stotts, for sharing that with us. Now, and I know you kind of talked about it a little bit there, but for the benefit of those that may need more clarity, was there a moment where you realized success, as most people chase it, was that was incomplete? Was there something that was missing that you were looking for?
What was missing was my heart. What was missing was my drive, my passion. What was missing was who and what I truly am, and that disconnection within myself was really, you know, it had me suicidal. It had me not knowing what to do with life. It really had me in a big mess, and so it was that disconnection between where my life was going and who I truly felt that I was. And, you know, the real moment, to be honest with you, I was in the middle of committing suicide. I was thrusting a large knife into my heart in the middle of the woods, very committed to ending my life in that moment. And somehow in that moment, I was dissolved in a ball of white light and felt the oneness of the universe, the perfection of life. That I felt very clear that not that I saw my purpose, but I knew that I had a purpose. And I don't know how long that experience lasted. I was a 22-year-old kid who knew nothing about these things and was completely caught off guard by that. And But when I came out, that really began my journey. I went up and stayed in a cabin we had on an island in the Northwest. It was a wood stove, outhouse kind of cabin. There was no fancy things, and I just sat and meditated. I sat and I walked and I breathed, and I discovered all the things that really became my path, my journey.
Oh wow, thank you for sharing that with us. So, just wondering, while you were going through that situation in some of the darkest moments of your life, what was that one thing that you thought about that helped you to climb out of that for the benefit of someone that may be experiencing the same thing now? What was that thing that helped you, that you thought of, that helped you to climb out of that very dark moment?
I would have to say I didn't think about anything. It was just that experience. It wasn't a mental process. It was just going from being very clear that it was time to end my life, and that was a very logical, very straightforward decision on my part. I was very committed, and there was no hesitation there, to all of a sudden becoming one with the universe and realizing the perfection of life, and just being bathed in that experience that shifted my, it was like, okay, how do I recreate that? How do I maintain that level of connection? How do I find my way through life knowing the truth of that experience? And that is really what I accomplished. I spent a great deal of hours and probably meditated 30,000 hours by the time I was 40 years old. And in those experiences, I certainly met teachers and guides, and I was able to recreate that experience in terms of the oneness, and able to dissolve in the infinite, and really have that inner connection and outer connection, and the totality of what that really expresses in terms of who and what we are. And so, there was no thought. And in fact, that's much of what I teach is, yes, you can neurologically develop the mind and be much better at accessing your creativity and levels of thinking, but it's really by going beyond that thinking and accessing what I call big mind that you access your true wisdom. You're able to handle things effortlessly. You're able to handle 5 corporations rather than just one. So that's the difference.
Oh wow, thank you so very much. Now let's talk a bit more about the work that you do, like you rightly talked about there. And let's chat a bit about the crisis of the leadership that we have today. So you've worked with several executives, entrepreneurs at the highest level, right? Why do you think so many ambitious professionals or entrepreneurs struggle to balance wealth, time, and family? What do you think is going wrong?
Well, it's pretty clear, to be honest with you, because when they call me, they're usually looking for some serious help. And, in that initial conversation, what I'm always hearing is that they're looking outside of themselves for what the problem is. They're identifying, it's these people or these circumstances or these issues. Those outside issues that they're identifying are what they need to resolve. And when I talk to them even further, it's like, well, how would you resolve that? And again, they're looking outside of themselves for answers. And the truth is, the answers they're looking for can only and always be found within themselves. And it doesn't take, even within that first call, and I call it a discovery call, they begin to understand, I see, these outer problems are really just symptomatic of an inner challenge that I'm not understanding, that I'm not really acknowledging and looking at. And as they begin to understand that all of these outer expressions and problems and issues with others, with work, with limitations, are really just that expression of their own inner limitations, then they get very curious. They get very curious of, well, what is that? Where does that come from? How do I resolve that? And of course, that's the journey that I take them on. And the truth is, it's probably the most exciting adventure in their life, because they begin to become more self-aware, they begin to understand themselves, they begin to understand who and what they truly are. They gain the confidence and the authenticity that they've always wanted. They begin to have the insight in terms of what their life is really about. What's their highest aspiration? What's the greatest meaning in their life that they want to focus on? So it's pretty exciting.
Oh wow, that's very interesting. So what you're saying is oftentimes leaders are reacting to symptoms of the problem and not actually the problem itself. That's very interesting. But for the benefit of leaders that are listening right now, what happens to some leaders that refuse to evolve, right? They're just keeping with the old habits without changing these habits. What would you say to such a person?
Well, lots of times they use excuses like, well, I'm running the company to make money. I got to be more productive. I've got to be more profitable. And I'm in full alignment with that. What they don't understand is by accessing more of who and what they truly are, that they connect not only with themselves more, they not only develop higher levels of thinking and creativity, they not only become more self-aware and emotionally intelligent, but they become a person who is more relatable. And in that relatableness, they find that their relationships with their own family, with their significant others, with their children, begin to seriously change, and they fall in love with themselves, and that relationship with themselves get mirrored in the relationship with others. I see people in work, because they become a bit more vulnerable and open and comfortable with being themselves. They find that others are more comfortable sharing and talking with them, and in that openness, they develop more trust within their organization, within their family too, of course, but within their organization. And that higher level of trust has people cooperating and collaborating more fully. And what all the research shows is that increase in collaboration and cooperation results in increased productivity and profits. The research shows an increase of at least 40%. And I certainly see that. But the truth is, most of my clients are seeing a much greater increase in their own personal productivity and income, as well as their organization's productivity and income. And I'm thinking of one fellow who now, he had 5 9-figure businesses when he came to me, a very creative, empowering guy. But within a year, he had doubled the value of 3 of those. And I met with him again, helping him through a transition recently. And those numbers would be, nothing compared to what he's done to date, within the last 5 years. I mean, it's multiple, because he's continuing to grow and expand. And I see that all the time. People are CFO and they want to become the CEO. Well, not only they become the CEO and really create an amazing growth-oriented organization, but they're capable of really taking on so much in life because they're not struggling with challenges. Everything that comes into their life from this higher level of thinking, they see as opportunities. And from that perspective of recognizing that everything that comes into your life is an opportunity, they access higher levels of thinking that allow them to really effortlessly, move through things. All those stumbling blocks become stepping stones, if you will.
Oh wow, amazing feedback from the people it is that you've worked with. That's really amazing. Now let's talk a bit about leaders on the path to evolving, right? So for professionals listening right now, working 60-hour weeks, trying to scale to 7 figures, what does it actually take to evolve into a higher level leader?
Well, what you're describing is people who are trying and efforting and working, and what results from that is not only their own burnout, but their burnout of others around them. And so that's not a win. That's not going to work. It's really amazing if people begin to understand that when there's struggle in their life, that is really nothing more than an indicator that they're ready to evolve. When you're running into challenges in your life, in your work, in your organization, That's not a problem. That's an opportunity. It's opportunity that's saying, okay, you're ready to evolve. And what that indicates is you need to access more of who and what you are so that you can handle and evolve. It's like the lobster who once a year they get this discomfort and niggle in their body and they go into their den and they have to shed that old shell. Well, that's a very vulnerable moment for them. You know, they use that shell to protect themselves, to capture their food, but they have to let go completely of that outer covering and grow that new, larger shell so that they can evolve into it. And people are the same. We find comfort zones that seem safe and productive, but they're really at some point going to be very limiting. And so we have to let go of those comfort zones, those perspectives, those ways of being, those limited ways of thinking, and evolve and discover what we're really capable of, who we truly are, so that we can create, the life and the love, if you will, that we're really longing for.
Oh wow, thank you so very much. That's very impressive. Now, you've talked a lot about the changes that we need to see, how they need to come from within and not so much of those external things that people focus on. So in your recommendation, what daily practices or mindset shifts can move someone from being overworked, being an overworked employee, entrepreneur, or professional to being an inspired leader?
So I'll just get down to the basics of it. It's really, what does a child want more than anything else? That's a question I've asked throughout the world. And the answer everybody knows is love. And do they want conditional or unconditional? Everybody knows that a child wants unconditional love more than anything else. And they also know that that child will do whatever it takes to get that love. So that's how we come into the world. And that's fine. That's normal. And every child figures out how to optimize the amount of love they can get from their family of origin and the social structures that they're raised in. There's parts of themselves that they don't feel are acceptable, maybe emotions that they can't really express, or aspects of themselves, that they don't feel comfortable. I walk people through an exercise where I'll have them repeat a sentence. If I love myself unconditionally, I'm afraid others will. Everybody across the board ends up saying others will leave me. And so why in the world, if you have a belief in your head that says, if I love myself unconditionally, others will leave me, why would you ever dare to love yourself? If I'm in my power, that's the same thing. Well, if I'm fully in my power, others will leave me. And as a child, that's going to be true. They might not leave you, but they're going to disconnect from you because they'll be uncomfortable with you. So all of those things that we hid away and stuffed into that inner cave in our gut, so that we'd be acceptable and adaptable as a young person, really are extraordinarily valuable aspects of who and what we are capable of being. So we have to open that, you have to breathe into and open that cave door so you can access all those aspects of yourself that you hid away and recognize their value. Recognize that, these are the very aspects of myself that I need so that I can grow and evolve into that conscious leader that I want to be and have the levels of success that I really find myself feeling worthy of.
Oh wow, thank you so very much. That's very interesting. I know you kind of touched on it in the course of our conversation, but for the people that are really very particular about this, what are the tangible results when people make this shift? What are the things that are pretty tangible in terms of maybe finances, the personality, or even their relationships? What are the tangible results that we can look out for?
Well, I see it all the time. That's why I do the work. That's why I'll continue to do the work. It's the first step that happens is they fall in love with themselves, and that changes their relationships with others. The next step is they become more mindful. They become literally more conscious. They'll be sharing with me how they're seeing the world, how they're feeling. What they're really describing to me is, I'm in a new level of consciousness that I understand. I'm more aware of what I'm thinking. I'm more aware of what I'm feeling. I'm more aware of what how I'm feeling and doing at any given moment in my life. And as they continue to evolve, as they continue to become more conscious, they recognize, oh, that level of consciousness that I'm in determines how I see, experience, and react to everything that comes into my life. And so all of a sudden it becomes a game of, oh, well, let's breathe into a higher state of consciousness where I can really see everything that's coming into my life as an opportunity. And as they begin to do that, that's when the magic happens. That's when their families all of a sudden begin to connect and feel safe and comfortable. And, you know, this person who's been kind of the authority figure, you know, in the family becomes a friend. They become somebody who they can connect with. You know, I watch their kids fall in love with their new dad or their new mom. I watch the partner begin to slowly develop trust that, oh, they are different, and this is a safe long-term environment and relationship that I want. And you know, the magical thing outside of, I think that's the most amazing thing to watch, to be honest with you, but quite literally, as you heal your emotional past, think in terms of you're only aware of about 5%, maybe 10% of your thoughts. And the other 90% of your thoughts are subconscious. So people have very noisy minds. And that, to be honest with you, is quite exhausting and limiting. And so as you heal your past, that subconscious, that thought that you are being, you know, moved around by, the limiting thoughts, the sabotaging thoughts that direct you through your life, all of a sudden those become more conscious. And as you heal, those subconscious negative thoughts become positive thoughts. And as you become more aware of your thinking, your mind gets quieter. And as your mind gets quieter, the forebrain begins to evolve and grow, quite literally. And the corpus callosum, the connection between the right and left brain, begins to expand. And that your CEO of the conscious CEO of your life begins to take over from the amygdalas, which are the emotional centers that have probably been running your life throughout your life. And so all of a sudden you have access to a much bigger picture. The right brain and the left brain are working together, and the right brain really is a more spontaneous, big picture, holistic, emotionally oriented perspective. But it begins to work with the left brain, that logical, very well-directed, solution-oriented mind. And so when you have just this, you're very limited. If you have just this, you're very limited. You put them together, you're very expanded. And so just to because you're literally neurologically rewiring your brain throughout this entire process. And so you have a completely new mindset. And so just to get to that neurologically integrated whole brain thinking level is really quite unique and amazing. And so your level of leadership, because your level of consciousness has gone up, your level of leadership has gone up. And so, you know, that's a celebration in itself. But the people who really stay with it start realizing, okay, but I'm still trying, I'm still efforting it's still thought process that's guiding me, and I'm spending a lot of time going down dead-end roads and experimenting and that type of thing. So the people who really excel and stay with the process begin to understand, oh, I really need to quiet my mind. And that's when they get involved more with the breathing and the meditation and the focus. Mindfulness, basically. And in that mindful state, they find that when a problem comes up, they need a solution, a design, some problem that they need to fix. That rather than try and figure it out, going through all that efforting, they really just sit quietly and focus on what they're looking for, what they want to resolve, what they want to create, and let that come in. Because as you quiet the mind, as you develop the mind, you know, you've probably heard of the different frequencies. You've got, when you're meditating, there's a certain frequency. When you're working hard, there's a certain brain frequency. When you are relaxing, when you're playing, those are all different frequencies, different levels of thought that you're going to have. When you learn to quiet the mind, there's what's called an alpha bridge that connects all of those different brain frequencies, that allows you to really access your wisdom, and accessing your wisdom, that becomes effortless. You don't have to try and effort and think, you just let. And so the more you practice that, the more those answers come to you automatically. And so you learn to begin to trust that. Oftentimes, a person who can hardly keep up with running one small organization is capable of running multiple organizations. Not only because they're handling their thinking in a much more extraordinary way, capable way, but they've also developed the leadership throughout their organization so that they're not micromanaging or controlling in any way. The leadership is really handling the development of their organization. So their job is to really, from that bigger picture, handle the emergencies, the unknown, the challenges that might come up, which are really few because those leaders are handling. I'm thinking of one guy who is, I was talking to a CEO of an organization that I'd worked with, and the founder of the organization, I'd asked him, well, how's he doing? And he goes, I don't know, I haven't talked to him for 2.5 months. And this is the guy, that founder had literally micromanaged that CEO. He was in a different position, but he micromanaged him for years. And now, because of the growth and development, trust and everything that was going on, you hardly ever saw him. And it's both the ease for the CEO, but also the ease for the founder, the ease for everybody in the organization. So the organization has literally continued to grow exponentially. And so everybody's, having a good time.
Everybody's having a good time. It's amazing how you've used, science, the human psychology, biology, and all of that to put together to explain to us what actually goes on within our brains, within our bodies, to help us produce amazing results. Thank you very, very much. Now, in your own experience, what is the biggest blind spot holding leaders back from both income growth and freedom?
I think the biggest blind spot that holds everybody back is fear. We create altars to fear in our life. We certainly create altars to fear in our mind. We don't recognize that. Watch every client that's ever come through my door. There's one common thing that I know is going to be the case, is they're not going to breathe. In other words, as soon as they start to feel something, as soon as they start getting uncomfortable, as soon as they get out of that safe comfort zone, they're going to stop breathing. And that sends signals to our body that we're in fight or flight. That sends signals that diminish our mental capacity. It diminishes our physiological capacity to take care of ourselves. And so, it all starts with trying to get them to breathe. It all starts with getting them to breathe so that the nervous system can reconnect and they can be aware of what they need and take care of themselves, so that their brain can go from that limited, sort of herd mentality or reptilian mentality, depending on how frightened they are, and go into those higher ranges of thinking. You quite literally, when you stop breathing and you signal that you're in fight or flight, your higher level thinking, the chemical gateways between the midbrain and higher brain, if you will, it's shut down. So you literally can't see things that you could otherwise in a higher conscious see. You can't think of ideas that if you were in a higher level of consciousness you could think of. And so people are literally, they're running a foot race with one leg tied behind their back. So my job is to help them untie that other leg so that they can at least function on a normal human level that they're capable of functioning on. And so, it's a matter of when a challenge comes up, my clients move from shutting down to opening up. When the challenge comes into their life, they've learned to breathe. They've learned to be present. They've learned to be curious, so that they can access the best of who and what they are, so that they're not looking at closing down, they're opening up into the solution. They open up into to the trust that that answer will come to them if they are in a good state of consciousness and present enough to hear it.
Oh wow, amazing. Thank you so very much. Now, if you could sit across the younger version of yourself at the start of your career, ambitious, driven, but perhaps a little bit unaware, what would you be telling him right now?
I think he did a great job. I really do. That was the biggest advantage in my life, was having that terrible experience when I was 19 or 20 in the Marine Corps. It was the best year of my life. The worst in terms of I had to let go of everything that I had been taught and rediscover my meaning of life. What are my values? Who am I? And that was a tremendous gift. It certainly didn't make my life easy, but it certainly made my life worthwhile. And so what I would give him the insight is, it's really, the first step is learning to accept and love yourself unconditionally. The second step is to really recognize what is your greatest aspiration. Not just what's your highest intention, but what do you aspire to? What are you going to have to breathe into? And then recognizing, well, who do I need to become so that I can breathe into that aspiration and create that dream that I have, that life that I have. And so, it's really, I say it all the time, what level do you want to play on? What level of consciousness do you want to play on? What level of joy do you want to play on? What level of love do you want to play on? That young man, he went on a very courageous journey. He was probably scared to death, but he didn't see an option. And that journey, as wandering as it might have been with all the ups and downs we've gone through, has really taken him to a place where I'll be sitting at times just in the joy of life. I'll be sitting in I'm in a relationship that's just so filled with love. I'm in a life, I'm in a home and a beauty that is it's such a gift that it's worthwhile. That why would have I ever done anything else? So I would just tell that young man, carry on. Go get him, kid. You got it.
Carry on, kid. Go get it. Impressive, interesting. So for the leader that is listening right now who feels like they're successful but they're not fulfilled, what is the first step towards creating their own inspired life?
Well, to be quite honest with you, give me a call. I mean that quite seriously, because we need an outside perspective. That person will only go in their head and spin their wheels trying to figure it out, or go down a lot of dead-end roads trying to understand or do something about it. Give me a call. I actually love doing the discovery call. It's not a sales call. It's literally, I am a doctor, and it's like you coming into my office and let's explore what's going on, and I can identify what those symptoms indicate and what you can do about that. And that, at least, if they do that, they know what they're up against and what their opportunities are and what they need to do to move beyond those limitations that they're feeling, that glass ceiling, if you will, that they're running into in their life.
All right, very interesting. Thank you so very much. As we gradually begin to round this up, if you could distill your life's work in one lesson about scaling wealth without losing yourself, what would that be?
Learn to breathe and use that breath to, I even today, I use my breathing to regulate my energy, to determine, I can use my breathing to determine what level of consciousness that I need or want to be in. And that gives me access to the levels of thinking and response that I need. If I run into something that I'm challenged by, I don't close down. I open up and breathe into it and see where the opportunity is. Because I absolutely trust and know that everything that's coming into my life is perfectly designed to support me in opening up my heart and empowering me and throughout my life. And that knowledge allows me to be grateful for whatever's going on in my life. That knowledge allows me to open up to life, and rather than resist everything that's coming into my life, open and embrace it, and really find, and enjoy the gifts. It's all rigged, and it's rigged in our favor if we can be in the right state of consciousness and not coming from a place of fear. If we can be in the right state of consciousness to really open to and embrace the opportunities that are coming to us.
Oh, wow. Ron, thank you so very much. It's been amazing having a chat with you. I've gained so much value on behalf of myself and everybody on this call, or those that will listen to this podcast afterwards. I'd like to appreciate you for taking our time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I hope I'm helpful to a few folks out there.
Dr. Ron has just shown us that true leadership isn't about chasing more. It's about becoming more. Scaling to 7 figures, yes, but not at the expense of time, family, and freedom. Conscious leadership, authenticity, and inspired living aren't just soft skills to life. They are the real code to success. This has been the Growth Code Podcast. I remain your host, Sheyi Agbede. And until next time, remember, there's greatness on your inside and the world is waiting for you to birth and manifest your greatness. Go out there and be profitable, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.